Hi everyone, I'm Cheryl and welcome to the Sewing Room channel. This is your tip of the week and I'm going to show you a cutting and stitching technique to help speed up your sewing process. So let's take a look at the block that I'm going to show you how to make. Right here, you're going to see that there's 4 different patches here, or block sections. This is called a 4-patch. But within this 4-patch is another 4-patch. 1, 2, 3, 4. And they're here and here. It's this process here that I'm going to show you how to quickly make these little blocks. Now, you can make this any size you want for this specific demonstration. These are 2.5-inch squares and these are 4.5-inch squares. So let's get started. To make this particular 4-patch, you want to use 2 different patterns. You can use a print and a solid, or 2 different prints, but make sure there's a sharp contrast between the 2. So this is how I've layered my fabrics. I've taken my first color, my solid fabric here, and I have it folded with the selvage edges together. So this is folded just like it is when you purchase it off of the bolt. And here is my other color, and I also have it folded with the selvage edges together. Now, it's really helpful if you have a cutting mat, a rotary cutter, and a rotary cutting ruler, preferably either a 6.5 to 8.5 inch wide ruler. So I've pulled the raw edges here, because they're not even, past one of the lines on my cutting mat, because I want to cut this edge straight. So I'm going to put this on top, line it up with one of the lines, and you want to make sure it's lined up at each end of the ruler and that it's not crooked. So I'm taking the lines on my ruler, placing them on top of the lines on the cutting mat. And I'm going to do my first cut. And now, whoops, I got to cut it again. There we go. Almost. Now I'm going to move my ruler. Don't move your fabric. I'm going to move it over 2.5 inches, because that's what I want to start out with to make that little 4-patch square. So I'm cutting 2.5 inches. But remember, you can cut your strips any size you want. All right, so I'm going to cut. I'm cutting through a lot of layers of fabric. That's why you want to make sure you have a sharp blade. Now you want to go over another 2.5 inches. Don't move your fabric, just move that ruler. And again, place your lines on your ruler on top of the lines on your cutting mat and cut. Now, depending on how big a project you're making, you can just keep going over cutting strips of fabric. Now I have both strips together. I've kept them together, and I've now placed them on a line going across here, because I want to cut each end of the strips off. And I want to cut these selvage edges off because I don't want them in my project. So I'm placing again those lines on my ruler, on the lines on your cutting mat. And now I'm going to go over to the other end here, and I want to just cut a little bit of it off, get those folded edges gone. Let me straighten this ruler out. There we go. And then do your last cut. Now take your 2 different fabrics, and you're going to take one of each and place them on top of each other. So you're bringing the pretty side of your fabric together. Now you can either pin these edges together, or if you're pretty good at holding the edges together, you want to go ahead and stitch a 1/4 inch seam all along this edge, just on one of the edges. Now have the darkest strip on top, and then press this edge. So you want to press the seam on the back side of the fabric. Then unfold it, and you're going to press on top. And you want to make sure that the seam is going towards your darkest fabric. Once everything is pressed, you're going to probably find each end is not exactly straight. That's okay. So we're going to go down to this one end. Now remember, I cut everything left-handed, so you're probably going to start at the other end. Okay, so now I'm going to take a line on my ruler. I'm going to pick any line, it doesn't matter. And I'm going to put it on top of my center seam, because your seam can be wavy after you stitched on it. That's just part of working with fabric. It does stretch. So I've got that line right here on my seam. I'm going to cut this edge straight down here. So I'm going to go here. So now I know that this edge is straight. Now don't move your fabric. Take your ruler and move it down 2.5 inches. Still keeping that line on your ruler on that center seam. And go ahead and cut. And you're going to keep going down every 2.5 inches, keeping the line on that center seam, and cut. And keep going until you've got all of it cut. Now lay your pieces out like this so that your fabrics are opposite of each other right there. So you have these two here and the darker ones here. Then you want to bring them on top of each other, pretty sides together. It's also called right side or front side. And match your seams. Make sure the seam on the bottom is going in the opposite direction of the seam on top. And I would pin your seam because it can move while you're stitching. And then you want to stitch a 1/4 inch seam all along here. Then when you're done, go to your ironing board and press it open. Now when you're stitching these together, you want to stitch everything together first, then go to the ironing board. So when you first cut out your strips, cut out all the strips you need, stitch them together, press them. Then take all your strips back to your your cutting board, cut everything, and then go to your sewing machine and begin stitching. It's called production line sewing, and it goes really, really fast. I like this technique for myself because I give a lot of pot holders out. Many of you tell me you sew and sell, so it's a quick way of speeding up your production of all of your sewing projects. Now take 2 of these blocks and place them like this. Then take another contrasting color and place them like that. And now you have that 4 patch I showed you on the pot holder earlier. So now you want to take these 2 rows and you're going to bring the fabric on top and stitch a 1/4 inch seam, and then do the same thing on this one, a 1/4 inch seam. After stitching, you want to press your seams again, and I have my darkest fabric on top. So go ahead and press your seam on this side, then unfold your 2 little blocks that you have here, and then press the seam on top. And as you're pressing, you're pushing the seams towards the darkest fabric. So it's all going up this way. Then take your blocks and put them like this. Isn't that pretty? Now you're going to take the 2 blocks that you have and you're going to bring them on top. Always match that seam in the center. Again, make sure the seam on top is going in the opposite direction than the seam on the bottom. Place a pin on that seam so it doesn't shift. If you want to pin the rest of the edges, you can do so. Then stitch a 1/4 inch seam. When you're done with that, press the back side of the seam, unfold, and press on top, and it doesn't matter at this point whether the seam is pressed this way or that way. All right, here the block is done over here. Here is another sample using different colors. You can use up scraps to do this particular project. So if you have leftover strips from jelly rolls like this, these are 2.5-inch wide strips. I keep all of my extra strips, or you just have small pieces of fabric that are long enough to cut. So it's a great way of reducing the size of your scrap pile. Now let's take a look at what it looks like in a pot holder. So there again, if you sew and sell, you can quickly make these a lot faster. Or if you're trying to make a quilt, it'll really speed up the process of your quilt. You can make a lot of these blocks, also put them into table runners. You can make pillows, put it into tote bags. You can use them almost in any sewing craft project that you have. Well, I hope you enjoyed this cutting and sewing technique. Try it sometime on some of your projects. I think you'll find it was really helpful to you. But remember, this is really important. Make sure your seams are all the same and all your fabrics are cut correctly, because then everything will just fit together really well. Now, if you're interested in other sewing tips of the week, look below your YouTube screen to the description section. So just scroll down, hit on that down arrow to expand that section open, and you will see all kinds of links. There will also be beginner sewing project tutorial links also listed down there. Make sure you follow me on Instagram and check out my Facebook page. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time, and happy sewing. If you like the Sewing Room channel, one of the best ways to show your support is to subscribe by clicking on that red subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. And don't forget to click on share to share this video with your friends. And make sure you click on the bell so you receive notifications for all my new videos. I'm Cheryl, this is Manny, and this is Scotty. See you next time.